COVID myocarditis, or COVID causing inflammation of the heart. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle. The biggest question leading up to this issue over the last year has been, does the COVID virus have any more proclivity to the heart than other viruses? Because we know that, for example, the influenza virus, the Epstein-Barr virus, parvovirus, lots of other viruses can affect your heart. And we know that sometimes after a viral illness, somebody could have a little bit of myocarditis or a little bit of CHF. And very rarely, sometimes people even have sudden cardiac death from this due to severe heart failure or cardiac arrest, whatever it might be. So when COVID first came out, there was a few studies that were published, one out of England actually, that showed that more people had COVID myocarditis than other viruses. Actually, it was a German study. It was a German study that showed that more people had COVID myocarditis than other viruses. And this, was carried by a lot of different news outlets, over 400 of them, and was circulated 900,000, almost 1 million times on the internet. Later, some people looked at the data and said, hey, you guys really overestimated this. So they published retractions and corrections. But of course, nobody saw the retractions or corrections. Later, Ohio State University reported that 26 athletes that had recovered from COVID, 15% of them, which out of 26 people is like maybe one or two, had some kind of myocarditis signs on their cardiac MRIs. So this brought about a lot of questions. Does COVID really have more proclivity or more harm to the heart, or is it still like a respiratory illness and a respiratory virus? So that's the question that they wanted to answer. So a lot of places have since done more studies. There was a study done on 19,000 athletes in the US where 3,000 of them had COVID. They ran a bunch of tests on them and found that less than 1% had anything to do with the heart. And of those eventually tested and had cardiac myocarditis, less than 0.2% ended up being hospitalized or having anything serious from myocarditis. They've since run multiple studies where they do cardiac magnetic resonance imaging on all the COVID hearts and athletes, non-athletes, whatever, and they found that it's still like less than 1% of all people have anything to do with the heart. And if you look at other viruses that are more prone to going to the heart, those are still a higher percentage. Not sure the exact number, but definitely it doesn't turn out that COVID has more proclivity or more harm to the heart than other viruses. Like I said, we've known that other viruses can cause issues with the heart, but this definitely is not one of them. This is a respiratory illness. It causes other issues. And just like anything else, it can sometimes affect the heart. Seems to be very, very rare and much less than other viruses that are known to cause myocarditis. But that's kind of where the evidence is right now. It's sad that when that first German study was published, everyone carried it over 1 million times. It was reshared on the internet. But unfortunately, with bad news, that's what happens. And then the corrections weren't spread as much, or the retractions weren't spread as much. So that's kind of where the evidence is now on COVID myocarditis. It's probably something we don't really have to worry about or get too concerned with. Any athlete that's had COVID was, the return to play should have been almost right away as soon as their symptoms resolved. The American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology put in some guidelines like, hey, maybe you should wait a little longer, but it turns out that none of that actually turned out to be true, and they've since actually retracted all of that as well. So that's all we know about COVID myocarditis.